Hi, Facebook. Welcome to the page. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for watching. Today, I want to share a story with you that I got a message. I got a message from a teacher almost 10 years ago. I was taking a religious studies class, and I grew up Catholic and Muslim, if that's not an interesting combination for you. But on some Saturdays, I would go to the mosque, and on some Saturdays, I would go to church. And what this did is it developed in me a curiosity. It turned me into a seeker, into somebody who was spiritually curious and just curious. Because I was born into multiple cultures, multiple traditions. And so that by going to these two places of worship and having this interesting experience of recognizing that both the Islamic teachings and the Christian teachings shared some really powerful and fundamental similarities, I became spiritually curious about why, if some of these spiritual truths are the same truths, why don't we get along? If some of these spiritual truths are so similar between this faith or that faith, how come my mullah or my cleric would tell me, Islam is the only way? Or how come my priest would tell me, if you don't accept Christ, you're going to burn, right? So this developed this rich, deep curiosity in me to learn and to understand. And so I've always been curious about this stuff. And then later on, as many of you know watching this, I had my rock bottom moment. And I won't go into the story today, but I did come to coaching. I did come to mindset because I wanted to learn how to effectively change. I wanted to learn how to access the keys to my own potential, as I think we all do. I really think that deep down, we truly do want to become the best version of ourselves. So I've always been curious about psychology, about spirituality, about philosophy. And I'm in college, and I have to take an extra English credit in order to graduate. And there's this religious studies class, interpreting the books of the New Testament. Yes. And so I ended up signing for the course. And so I find myself in that class one day, and I was very talkative in general. So the teacher kind of figured out very early on that she needed to call on me to make sure I wasn't going to be making a ruckus in the class, right? And so I'm pulling it. We're interpreting the New Testament. So I pull out the New Oxford version of the Bible that she required us to have for the class, and I put it on my desk. And as soon as I put it on my desk, she goes, Peter, read from the book of Revelations, right? And it was just kind of an interesting moment. I'd never heard my name said like that, and nobody had ever told me, said, Peter, read from the book of Revelation. And so everybody who studies, I think, spirituality or the Bible, people in general are just fascinated by the apocalypse. We're fascinated by shows like The Walking Dead, end of the world scenarios, the day after tomorrow. And with all of the images that we're getting now of the cathedral of Notre Dame burning to the ground, the iconic type of imagery like that, it just reminded me of that symbolism of the apocalypse. And so I did as she asked. I began to read. From the book of Revelations, and I went through and I read passage after passage. And, the interesting thing, at the end of the reading, we started to begin to discuss. We started to begin to look into these teachings on a much deeper level, much deeper. And as we started to go through and interpret, she said something that stuck with me to this day. And it's a theme that I like to be aware of. She said that initially, because Christianity is what is known as an apocalyptic religion, and so is the Jewish faith as well, right? That an apocalyptic religion is a religion that foresees the end of the world. It's apocalyptic is a religion in which they prophesize the end of the world. And so, which we all know, by the way, just spirituality and religion aside, we do know that one day this earth will end. No, let alone that we're all going to die. That one day we're all just dust in the wind, right? At some point that is going to happen, which, by the way, is one of the most powerful awarenesses that you can become aware of to achieve your potential. Because when you're radically aware of how precious this moment is, when you're radically aware that your life is temporary, when you're radically aware of how much each moment is a gift, that's when your values become clear. That's when who you are, that's when that really begins to crystallize what's important to you. And all of the other things that are trivial, the fear, all the other BS, the stories, the limitations, when you become aware of your own mortality, that's when you really start to live at that moment, right? Tony Robbins has this incredibly powerful story that he was doing a seminar on 9/11, and he brought this up. He says, when do people really begin to live? When they face death. And so he had people make a list. And God, I encourage all of you, if you're watching this right now, you don't have to do this, but this accidental click on this live stream could become something so profound if you choose it. But if not, that's fine. Just allow yourself to connect to the message. He said, I want you to pretend that we're not going to get off this island today. I want you to pretend that this is your last day on earth. Who would you call? What would you say? What would you do? And then later that day, 9/11 happened. And the seminar was in Honolulu. It was in Hawaii, so they were 11 hours behind. And one of the women in that seminar had come there, and she had gotten in an argument with her boyfriend when she had left the seminar. And he told her, he said, you know, if you go to that seminar, we're over. We're finished if you go to that thing. And so she called him, and she said to him, you know, because he had proposed to her. And she said, baby, I love you. I just wanted to tell you that you're the most important thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I love you. When I get back, I want to marry you. I want to be with you, right? She leaves him this message. Meanwhile, he's in the World Trade Towers when he gets this, after the planes have flown into him. And he calls her back from the top of the World Trade Center before he's going to die. And he says, baby, you don't know how much this message has meant to me. You know, and the only thing I can tell you is this must be a sign from God. Every day, live your all, give your all. Don't let anything ever stop you. And it's that awareness, that keen awareness of our own mortality that allows us to really sharpen and focus on what's important. It cuts out all the other distractions. So in leadership seminars, they'll ask you to do things like write your own eulogy. They'll ask you to sit down and say, how do I want to be remembered? What do I want people to say? What's the legacy I want to leave behind? So thinking about all this, being sharply aware of it has been so, so important. And I'm watching this cathedral and the images of this cathedral, and I'm reminded of that saying that my teacher told me all the way those many, many years ago. And she said that in the initial Hebrew, apocalypse did not mean the end of the world. Apocalypse meant the end of the world as we know it in the original Hebrew. Is one interpretation. There are many interpretations of these texts. That's one of the difficulties, right? When you're trying to interpret old texts, is that these translations can go in multiple directions. Different meanings, different interpretations can happen depending on who's learning. And so this idea that the apocalypse is the end of the world as we know it, suddenly I had a revelation. Suddenly I realized that now in 2019, we are living in the most apocalyptic time that has ever existed, in the sense that life as we know it continues to change and change and change over and over and over again so rapidly. Yesterday, it feels like there were no self-driving cars. Today, there are, right? Before, there were no cell phones. Now, look at everything we can do with this device. You are connected to genius. All of the genius that has lived before you is now available to you at the touch of a button. That is completely revolutionary. There has never been a time like this before. And we're not doing good at human nature. Our technology is advancing, but we haven't mastered ourselves. We know, if you're watching this, I know that you know. I know that you know that your beliefs, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about the world, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy that what you believe affects how you feel, it affects the quality of action that you take, which determines the results that you get, which feeds back into your belief system. And the vast majority of people have this understanding, but very few are using it. So I began to think, because this is the kind of person that I am, because this is what I do, is I help people to recognize, number one, what's important to you, what's really important to you in this life. What do you really want in your time here? Because isn't it true that, I mean, when you were a kid, it felt like, for me at least, it felt like the years were long. I couldn't wait for the next Christmas. I couldn't wait for the next birthday. But then as I got older, all of a sudden it was like, psh, now I'm 5 years old. Oh my God, now I'm 10 years old. And then when you look back at it, it's almost like, it almost feels like time hasn't slipped away at all. You know, 20 years goes by, 30 years goes by, a decade gone like that. And really, our whole life is going to be over before you know it. So what on earth do you want to do while you're here? What are you meant to do? What are you meant to give? How much love and passion do you want to flow through you? What do you want to create? Do you know that Gallup did a poll? 80-some Americans dislike their job. No, I'm sorry. 87% of Americans hate their job. Over 90% dislike their job. And that's the majority of your adult life. That's 40 years or more. 97% of Americans are going to spend the next 40 years doing something they hate. So my invitation to you is to help me. And I know this sounds grandiose. I know this does. But my invitation to you is to help me in creating a new apocalypse, a different type of apocalypse, a new end of the world as we know it, an end to the human being, the individual, absorbing their beliefs from their environment and never questioning them, an end to people living accidentally, breezing through life, letting the media, TV, their habits push them around. Help me enter and step into a world in which you choose who you want to be, what you're going to create in this life, what you're here to give. Help me step into this world, this dream. Help me awaken inside this dream together of a place where you and me and together we're all intentional. We're intentional about our belief system. We're intentional about the emotions. We're intentional about our behavior. We're intentional about what we create, what we do, the legacy that we're here to serve, the people that we're here to love. Let's enter together into a world let's awaken inside of our own potential. Let's awaken inside this dream of this dream you. When you think about who you are at your best, let's create that dream life and then let's awaken inside of it.